With tax reform on President Trump's agenda, what does that mean for businesses here in San Diego?
Yeah, here to talk more about that is Jerry Sanders, President and CEO of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, and Tom Wornham, President and CEO of the San Diego Private Banking, I guess it is?
Private Bank.
Private Bank, yeah. Thank you both for joining us. The business outlook hit a low this time around. What happened? Why are things looking up, especially considering the national economy is looking up? Tom?
So overall, when Jerry and I were going through the results, I think we both agree a lot of bad things were happening in the world in August. You had the North Koreans lobbying ICBMs for the first time. You had the North Koreans doing nuclear tests. If you look what was going on domestically, you had Congress and the President really did not come up with anything substantial, which everyone had hoped for in July. And then you had, obviously, some racial tension going on socially throughout the country. So both internationally and nationally, no good news. And then you had some other stuff going on within the elements which we'll get to in the report. Within auto, as an example, you saw auto down significantly, the index, and transportation. You had record defaults on first-time auto loans. So it was a perfect storm, if you will, of just negativity.
Let's talk about the numbers and how this lack of confidence or loss in confidence affects the bottom line. What specifically is important to know here?
Well, you know, I think that this is just 1 month, and it's been pretty stable for, like 9 months. It's been up in the 20s. This is the second lowest it's ever been, and it was back in about October 2016 that it really took a dip. So, I think that we had all those things going on in the last 2 weeks when this poll was done, and Hurricane Harvey was starting to hit. And I think what's happening now is that we'll be able to see next month whether this is sustained. But I think people are also looking at D.C. and saying nothing's coming out of there. And 78% of the businesses said we need to have tax relief. And it just doesn't. You can't tell what's going to happen.
Jerry, that's a big question. Tom, I want to ask you that. I mean, everybody's waiting for tax reform. And Steve Mnuchin and Gary Cohn, a couple of members of the Trump team, are working behind the scenes tirelessly to get this done. The question is, can they get it done before the end of the year, and will it make a big enough impact on businesses?
And that's huge, because tonight, as an example, is, the President is having a bipartisan dinner, right? So very different than what was going on in the medical discussion. It's bipartisan. If they can walk off with a bipartisan solution, I think that'll do more for the morale of this country and the economy when they can see both parties working together, coming up with a tax plan that everybody thinks is fair. And, I think just watching this effort be bipartisan is massive. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as you know, we really haven't seen much tax change in a quarter century.
Right.
There are people in the San Diego delegation working at both sides of the aisle. And we're one of those fortunate regions that have really good folks representing us on both sides of the aisle. And hopefully that translates.
Tom, you mentioned the auto industry as one of the sectors that has been impacted negatively in this last survey. Jerry, what can you tell us about some of what worries you most? Which sectors and which ones seem more resilient to you?
Hospitality is way down. It's down to 3, and that's hotels and restaurants. But, that's pretty normal into the summer. And, they're always kind of eking their way through with labor costs and all of that. So I think that's going to be pretty resilient. When you have uncertainty, people don't go out and buy a car. So when you got 2 weeks of really bad news, nobody says, I think I'll go out and buy a car this weekend, I'll feel better. So I think all of that is going to bounce back, and I think it's positive. You look downtown, more cranes are going up every day. I mean, I've seen 2 or 3 new ones just on the west end of downtown. So I think the economy is still strong in San Diego, and we're seeing a lot of building and things like that. I just think this is one of those seasonal dips along with a lot of other stuff going on.
Well, we're kind of starting to hear some positive news coming out of D.C., especially with wages being up and hiring being up across the country. So maybe that'll kind of shift our way.
I think it will help out, and I think stability and optimism always help out.
I won't buy a car when I'm feeling down, but I'll buy a pair of shoes.
There you go. Start with the single steps.
Thank you, guys.
All right, see you guys. Thanks a lot.